Morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I know this is going to be a big lift for you, but where am I?
Well, I think you're in Monument Valley, or Arizona.
Still, right?
Still, that the previous Monument Valley photo was at sunrise, and now here we are in midday. So beautiful scenery, beautiful countryside.
It's very disappointing. I thought I would confuse you with
No,
this.
no, I was on top of that one.
Yes, you were. Yes, you were. I'm the one that's slow today, that's for sure. Um, all right, so why don't you remind everybody what we're doing for the last podcast and then this one?
All right. We're in our 73 series, and we're talking about the leader in action, the leader as a transformative person, changing the organization in the age of AI, using the emerging technologies, specifically using AI, generative AI models. And we've actually gotten requests from some of our listeners to go more deeply, to go a little more slowly into a couple of the concepts we've been talking about. Now, you and I know, Tom, we're talking about new ways of working. So people have asked us, just let's go over it again so that they can really grasp what we're saying and what they have to do. Very much specifically what they have to do. Now, in video 2A, 73-2A, which is actually being released, made public today, May 1st, we talked about the concepts underlying a lot of what we've been saying for the past 2 or 3 months. In this video, we're going to address the how. What does the leader do? We work in this what and how dichotomy. Last week was what, this is how. And we're going to be talking about the context the leader is working in, the characteristics of the leader, and how this relates to a new way of working. Now, one of the points that we were asked to clarify is when we're talking, for example, about 8 characteristics of a leader in the age of AI, we're talking about things that some people say sound a little familiar. These may come up in some of the industrial age self-help books on leadership. The difference is that, yes, we may be saying that you have to think strategically, which leaders have been told to think strategically for a long time. What we're saying is you're not just thinking strategically, you're using all of the information and tools available to you in the AI to drive a higher level of work that creates more value in the marketplace and for your customers, and therefore delivers higher level results for the company as a whole. That's the difference. You may be somewhat doing the same sorts of things, but you're acting at a different level with different results out there. So, yes, some of the things we say may echo things that you've heard, like think strategically, get your job done, act responsibly, and so forth. But it's in a different way. And that's what we'll go through today. So, we're planning to start by just reviewing the context the leader is working in, because the leader is working in a different context in this age of AI. So, do you want to jump in, Tom, or?
You
Okay.
know, that is the key. That's the whole key to this is that these characteristics, Deirdre, we could have written these characteristics 10 years ago and we probably did at that point. I think the last
Right.
time we really did these was a couple of years ago. We came up with
Yes.
this. But we could have done this 10, 15, 20 years ago. They would sound the same, but the context in which you operate within them is different, the point you were just making. And we can think of, you and I have a list here. Just the first is this idea, the concept that we talk about, which is the vertical and the horizontal work. That when you think about the work you do today, it's no longer functional as being the key. It's both functional and horizontal, which is the what we've called the value stream, which is again a concept that's been around for a very long time. Michael Porter, but was difficult to not only envision, but to make real
Mhm.
because of the fact that we didn't have the capabilities today to be able to do those things and to calculate a value stream in an easy way and a replicable way. And that's, you're able to do that today across the organization. I would say that especially the logistics people, the people on the supply chain side will say, well, we've had a value stream for a long time. You have, but it hasn't unfortunately carried through to the whole organization, including out to the marketplace and back.
Right,
And that's what the key is. The other is the ability to do that, which is the AI insight layer. It's being able to synthesize the information within and without both front and back of the organization, along with the organization, synthesize that in a powerful way,
right,
and to think about the proper deployment of that capability in the organization for whatever you're doing. Then the concept of you're using that, which all of the things we've just described, which we characterize as work fluency. It's
right,
your ability to see the organization beyond the function, because we've all grown up, most of us, including even current people in the workforce, a lot of the current people in the workforce grew up with this idea of becoming a functional expert, which we think we all got to where we are because we became functional experts and then learned how to apply it in a smarter way. Well, now that we think is going to only make up about half your job. It's going to be the 150th, excuse me, 50%, not 150th,
right,
50% of of what you are expected to know. And then this concept of what's the other, and we call that word fluency. So it's the difference between the vertical and the horizontal.
right,
This is the functional, that's the work fluency, meaning you understand and you grasp this concept of value streams and how you get there and the employment of the capabilities to get you there. And then there's the whole issue that we believe has been there for a long time, and we've actually incorporated into what we talk about for a very long time now, and that's called the value equation. What
correct.
are you expecting from the marketplace in return for what you've delivered? And you sure as heck are striving for, no matter what you're doing, is that the value you're receiving is greater than the value you're giving.
Right,
And then what separates you from perhaps if you're for profit from a non-for-profit is what do you do with the difference, right?
right.
So I'm done. That's all I have today, dude. So you're gonna have to take it from here.
Okay. Let me build some more because remember we're creating more of the context for our listeners to help explain what we're talking about. You and I both remember about 15 years ago when the big theme in business was big data. That the idea that all organizations have data, they need to find their data, organize their data, and then use their data. And it was very interesting to watch a lot of companies just stumble over this whole idea. You know, what's our data? How do we use it? How do we do all of the manipulation with data? How do we, and so forth. What we're actually talking about right now, when we're talking about working horizontally and working in the AI insight layer, is the result of all of that big data work. That in a big corporation, each function has found its data, it's organized its data, it's brought this data up and made it available to be used. But not just within a function, it's making it available to be used across the organization. So that, for example, when the marketing function is developing a strategy for new marketing campaigns, it can tap into the sales functions data. It can look to the human resources data to see what people and skills are available for it to use in its campaign. It can tap into the financial data to see the results of this work and so forth, and across all of the functions. This is really what we mean when we talk about working horizontally. It's you've done your big data work and you've got your data all up and everyone in the organization has the ability to work with it. We go beyond that to say that now there's the expectation that everyone in the organization will be up there using all of this data. No more working down in an individual function. Obviously, the expertise within each function has to operate within that function, but then you bring your expertise up and tap into this horizontal layer. And I'm now going to drop the term AI insight layer, where you get all of the data from all of the work being done across the organization, so that you can relate your work not just to your functional goals, but you can make your functional work serve the broader needs of the organization as a whole and work toward meeting organizational goals as a whole. This is a higher level of working beyond the level at which most organizations today work. And we go even farther and say that this work is made easier, if that's the term for everyone, by using AI models, by taking this AI insight layer and using it to create the context in which these AI models work on specific issues and problems for the specific organization. Listeners may remember that we talk about our five-step process of interaction with these models, starting with the model does research, the human interacts with the model, and then the human creates the context, which drives the work of the model further. And then it goes on, the model synthesizes, and then the human finalizes the work. But at that layer of context, at that third step, which is the context, that is truly where, if it hasn't been done previously, the people using the models are in there bringing the models into the AI insight layer to create a higher level of output from the machine. Now, as we note in the whole process, that's still just output from the machine, and then the human still has to take this and create the output that is useful for. But this is far more detailed, productive, and useful work than what we hear many people are doing. Many people are just going in, asking a question, the machine comes up with something, and people are pulling that out of the printer and turning it in. Nah, that's nowhere near using these models in a way that creates the higher level of value, the higher level of productivity, and the greater results for the organization. So that's the context that the leader has, that leaders now have the result of all of the big data work captured in an AI insight layer that goes horizontally across the entire organization. Leaders use this AI insight layer to create greater context for the AI models, which drives the models to create higher level work, which the leaders then use to create higher levels of results and profitability for the organization. So that is the context. And in that context, the leader then carries out what we call the 8 characteristics. We're getting at the how here. And let me spend a minute on that. That what I've just described is part of the how of the leader creating the context in which these tools do their best work. It means that the leader knows the five-step process, knows how to interact with the machine, knows how to capture the data and the information and the insights from the whole organization and feed that into the machine. I mean, we've shown this multiple times whenever we've shown people how we use these models, there's a a place where you feed files into the machines and then ask the machines to read these files and adjust the content that they've created based on the context and information and data that's just been provided to them. Leaders need to know how to do this as they work with the machine. And it's then at that point that the machines synthesize a higher level of information, not only drawing on what the machine can contribute, but drawing on what the leader contributes by creating context. And let me stop at this point before we move ahead with the characteristics, Tom, and let you, I know you've got a number of things to say here.
Well,
Go ahead.
really only one, Deirdre, and I didn't even get a chance this morning to mention this to you, but yesterday I was helping someone who, when we say we were looking back 15 years to look at the data from big data, well, she was only a teenager, a young teenager at that point.
Yeah,
But she and her husband were on the phone to me asking me about this and they were questioning this idea of, by the way, they liked the idea of treating the machine more as a human interaction than as a question answer machine.
right.
But they weren't quite getting what I was trying to get at. And so what I told them was, look, when you're going through this, we talk about the 5 steps, and one of those steps is you're really asking the machine to tell you. And what that is doing is not just teaching you what the machine knows, but by when it's telling you and you're kind of giving it a little bit of positioning, itself is positioning against its trained data.
Right.
And so then you go through this process of providing context. And what you're then doing is you're moving the machine against its training data and against its knowledge database, which is vast. By
Hmm.
doing that work of positioning the machine before you really get started, what you're doing is you're positioning the machine in that value of data so that it gets the best representation of the data that applies to the context you're working under. Otherwise, you may not get the best answer because it could be that it's not looking exactly there unless you do a very deep dive and then you're taking a lot of resources and a lot of time. And you and I have done things back in videos where we've taken 10, 15 minutes to get an answer on a
Right.
deep dive. That if we had positioned perhaps a little better, it wouldn't have taken as much of that time. So the reason why we think a bit beyond just we think there's a human aspect, which I know we'll talk about in the future, is what are the reasons why or against adoption of technologies? You have a whole theory, and I think you will have soon a thought paper on that, right?
Yes, I will. Yes.
So look for that. Deirdre's doing a thought paper on the whole idea of work fluency and the effect of that. And I'm sure at some point you'll get to the actual point um, of this concept of how rapidly is this really going to be adopted in its
Correct.
extreme cases, right? Are we going to see robots taking over our lives for us, that sort of thing? And
Right.
Deirdre has a whole theory that I think makes a lot of sense to me, but I've been indoctrinated having worked with you for so many years, Deirdre.
Right.
But the reason why we think there's another value of treating the machine with more of a discussion-like approach is this positioning of the model
Mhm.
against this vast amount of information it has so that it is looking in the right place to give you answers. That's the one thing I would say. It's also, it is probably the most surprising part of what you and I do with people we're helping on the outside. She and her husband have a an outstanding business in California that supplies the wine industry, the wineries there, and or wineries more than just in California. But they provide an incredible, valuable service. But they want to be able to use now these models, and they were coming to me to ask about how best to go about this, or how is one way that we think might help them. So I
Right.
was helping them with that. Fascinating business, and we certainly can do some things that'll help them. Not we, but I can give them some guidance on them doing it. But this is the second point. They would never have been able to do this before.
Right.
What we're they're going to create the models, by the way, using Claude Cowork and skills. They're going to develop the skills themselves.
Right.
Um, this is stuff they would not be able to. And is there a solution? Yes, there are commercial solutions, really ugly, very expensive, and actually don't meet the real need of what they need.
Correct.
But I see no reason based on an hour and a half yesterday, they can't do this themselves. Being able to do this yourself, and these are two really, really bright people, right? Switched on. And, but to be able to do this yourself when you're not technically there, these people are wine experts, right? And logistics experts, um, not in the world that you and I deal in.
Right.
But I'm sure they're going to be able to get this done themselves. And this is all about thinking about it in a different way. And that this whole idea of thinking about it horizontally and trying to figure out, okay, now how do I solve that problem that way rather than this way? um, is what breaks the loose. And then this concept of using the model to help you because you're asking the model to help you rather than you telling a model to do something. And this is why you and I say that one of the ways we think you can get the most out of these models is treat them like a very bright human, right?
Right.
That somebody that's very bright, has incredible capability, much beyond you, a reach that you can't even comprehend in terms of its reach of knowledge. What it doesn't have is context, and it doesn't have the judgment that you have.
Mhm.
And it literally doesn't have the leadership. And that's what the human is bringing to this, is bringing the context, the judgment, and then the leadership.
Right.
And that is the key. And once you get that in your head, you then approach the models differently and you can get the most out of them, just like a human. You don't tell this bright person what to do. You have them tell you what they think they should do. And then based on that, you guide them and mentor them so that they can become better and better at this. Now I'm completely out of gas. I have no more to say on this subject. So now I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay. Let me bring in one more point of the leader's context before moving on to the 8 characteristics. And that is that leaders have teams, uh, C-suite, executives, managers, individual contributors, all together, that we talk about the changing substance of work, but what we mean by that is the 50-50 split between functional expertise and the work fluency, that the leader needs to, as part of the context toward delivering the higher level results and profitability, create a team that does the same stuff, that works in the same way, that everyone is buying into and using AI models, working horizontally, even while they're working in their functional specialty, tapping into the AI insight layer and generating output that draws on everything that the company operates. People are no longer, nowhere in the organization, going to be focused only on functional goals. Yes, they'll have functional goals, such as you're responsible for delivering or for creating the balance sheet. Okay, that's fine, but that has to be brought up and created in the whole context of validated in the whole context of the AI insight layer here. And so the leader, in reordering the substance of work throughout the organization, drives personnel to work and deliver output at a level in agreement with the organization's goals and the organization's desired results. That is by bringing the work of all personnel across all layers of the organization up to the layer level where they're working with the AI insight layer for the good of the entire organization. The organization as a whole will deliver higher level results, greater profitability, greater marketplace functionality, expertise, renown, market share, whatever you want to call it. So that part of the context is not only the things like working horizontally or tapping into the AI insight layer that the leader works with. It's also then bringing that to the entire team of the organization and making sure that the entire context it contains the entire team working in the same way. Part of this is also, and you and I have talked about this in many ways, Tom, that we know that there are people in every organization in the world who are already using these models in their work. The problem is the leaders don't know who's doing this, what way they're using it, and so forth. And besides the whole issue of risk and security involved with this, and there are significant issues of risk and security involved with this, it would be much better for the organization, for the leader to find out what's going on here and capture the work that people are doing and bring it all into one way of working with the AI models, with the organization's AI insight layer, working toward the organization's goals. So all of that works to create the context in which then the leader as an individual works. So you're working in a new way. You've got your work fluency down. You've got your organization working in the same way. And now you start to get into the individual how, your 8 characteristics. And you and I, Tom, have listed these 8 characteristics in previous videos. We've talked about them. And this is where some people's listeners come to us and say, okay, I know the first one is think strategically, but what does this mean for a leader operating in the A of AI? Well, it consists of 2 aspects. One is the status the leader faces, the context the leader faces in relation to the characteristic, and then what the leader has to do in relation to the characteristic. I know I'm nitpicking a little here, but I want to break it out like that to say that there are things that the leader finds themselves doing because of this in relation to a characteristic of think strategically, and then the things the leader has to do. So in the organization, when the leader is working with the work fluency, the leader, in terms of the first characteristic, thinking strategically, finds themselves with continuous access to a full range of organizational and marketplace data through working through the AI insight layer. Now think about the work of the leader, which you and I define as strategy. Strategy is the work of a leader. So how does this work, the work of strategy, change if a leader has continuous access to a full range of organizational and marketplace data? A greater ability to identify opportunities, a greater ability to match strategic thinking to the actual resources and reality of the organization, a greater ability of the machine to assess the risks and the problems in execution. That's what work fluency brings to the whole characteristic of thinking strategically. Now, the leader then needs to use this work fluency to understand how to work with the machine through the 5-step process we were just describing. Use the machine to break out of old patterns of thinking about the organization and strategy to suggest new ways of meeting marketplace needs and creating value. This is so important, Tom. I mean, you and I have been talking with leaders for what? 5 decades or so. And so many of them say, yeah, strategy. Well, we'll just pull up our last year's strategy and we'll, apply new data to that. But basically, it's the th same thing, and we're just executing again. It's sort of like, no, for heaven's sakes, no. There is such change in the marketplace and in all organizations today due to, well, the emerging technology, new ways of working, new competitors, new needs and wants by consumers, new themes in business, and so forth. All of this needs to be brought into the way a leader develops strategy going forward. And the machine captures this by tapping into the context of the AI insight layer to create a strategy that, at the very worst, keeps pace with the change, at best, keeps the organization ahead of change and leading the marketplace to deliver the greater results, etc. So, through the use of the machine and through the work fluency, the leader can help assure alignment of strategy with the vision and mission of the organization. That if in times of change, if you simply roll over your strategy year to year, you will drift far away from your organizational vision and your organizational mission, and your competitors will swoop in and take your customers away. That's basic bottom line of the reason to use work fluency and the AI models to tap into this AI insight layer as you do your strategic work as a leader every year. Do you want to say anything at this point, Tom? Okay, go ahead.
The one of the quickest ways that you can check your strategy is to have one of these models tell you what the world thinks of your strategy. So, and this holds true for almost all of these 8 characteristics, Deirdre. The starting point, I think, is get the models to tell you what the world thinks about your strategy. And you may say, well, I've got a relatively small business. It doesn't know much about my business. And I say, I can assure you somebody else out there is using a strategy similar to yours, and it can tell you that here's who is using that strategy, and here's what the world thinks of that strategy, as opposed to who has what strategy. And it's important to understand what strategy derives from. Strategy is an approach to doing something. The thing you're trying to do is you're trying to achieve your mission, which is the job of the organization. And the reason you have a job defined for the organization is that's supporting the steps toward your vision, right? So the first thing you want to do is to check and make sure your vision is still good. So,
Mhm.
so you need to be able to say to the model, tell me what the world thinks of my vision, mission, and strategy.
Right.
And you have to tell the model, now I define strategy as my view, my long-term view of success of the marketplace and my role in that success. And then my mission is what is the next reasonable step I'm going to take towards that vision? That vision may be 10 years off or 5 years off. What is my next reasonable step? And that may be 6 months, that may be 2 months, it may be a year. Whatever you think, you're the one running the organization, you're the one leading it. What you think that reasonable step is, and then the strategy is your approach to achieving that step towards your mission, towards your vision. So it's that step which is your mission towards your vision. So that's the stuff that you can get. The models can help you understand how that all sits with the outside world. It doesn't matter what your people in the company think. What matters is the marketplace that you are playing in and you are trying to do a value exchange with. And so then when you're getting into this point about characteristic one, which is you think strategically, that means something very different today under that context than it did before when you might have had somebody do a bunch of market research for you and put a presentation together and a white paper for you, whether you did it inside your business or you yourself did it because you're an entrepreneur and you only have a few people working in the business and you know it best, or you hire BCG or McKinsey to do it for you, which is where IBM was. And when you were at Deloitte, the way they handled this, or Deloitte probably did it themselves. But but being that as it may, that's what we mean by this. You're doing the same thing. You're testing your strategy out, testing out your mission, testing out your vision, but um, you now have the ability to do it yourself. And when I mean yourself, I mean you as the
Mhm.
CEO or the top leader of your business. And then Deirdre would say, but you need to have your top people experiencing this with you, and they're seeing through you doing. They're learning so that you can begin to develop the adoption of this inside the company, which is the only way this is going to really work because you've got people using it today, and unless they're really switched on, they're using it vertically. They're using it in what Deirdre would say is a productivity enhancement way that can do
Right.
incredibly valuable things that way. But what we're talking about is we're talking about the horizontal aspect to complement on that vertical. And one other point about that, Deirdre, it's not, and we believe firmly that functional expertise is got to be there. Because if it's not, you don't have the base functioning of your business.
Right.
Numbers have to add up, right? Logistics systems have to run. Your tracking systems have to be correct. So there
Right.
is always going to be a place for people that make sure that that's functioning. Now, at what level they do that, who knows? We'll learn that over time. So this comes back to then the final thing I have to say about this is this point about people could be saying in the back of their mind, well, dear, this is great, but I'm being told that we're laying off half of our people because of AI. Now, you will say, okay, I think it's a fit issue more than it is an AI issue. The fit being, can you do this? Do they anticipate that you can actually do this? And I have another friend who's going through exactly this situation. They're trying to figure out in their business, because they're a huge business, they're trying to figure out who do we keep and who do we not keep. And my argument to her was, you need to be one of those people that gives the impression that you understand this and you can function that way. Because that is, if I were taking and saying, I've got to find a way to change my cost point and I've got to find a way to drive this productivity into my organization because my competitors are going to do it too. I would do the same thing, but I would be looking for those people inside the business that can actually help me do it, not to get those out of our business. So when we're saying this, and when Deirdre says, look, this is something that is important for you to do and almost mandatory that you learn to do, it's because of that. Those are the people that we are convinced will survive this and carry this through in a smart way into the future. And the final thing I will continue to say is that there is a place, and even when you look at the sci-fi literature that anticipates over long periods of time where this is potentially going to go, there's always a place for the human in here. And I believe that the human adds three things: context, judgment, and leadership, the direction you want it to go. And that's the whole point behind the book that we just published called Ahead of the Machine. It's that you lead the machine, you don't follow the machine. And these are characteristics that all thinking strategically, this first characteristic, and Deirdre, I'll be surprised if we get through half of these eight by and we're timing out here. But
We're
be
going
that
to
as
have
it
to do
may,
it. Yeah.
right? Because I haven't even given you another shot on this to counteract my point here. But when we talk about thinking strategically, think about what we've just said. This is not a conversation we could have had 5 years ago and
Correct.
had it make any sense at all. And we're going to find going through these characteristics, they all share the same characteristic, which, when we talk about these eight characteristics of the leader, and this is what is that leadership you're now taking to the future? It's this. So if we had written a book about this back 5 years ago, that book will look very, and I'm writing that now, but it looks very different. And we're actually calling it "Do You Fit?" is the name of the book, right? Because that's going to be the real question. Do you fit the future of what a leader needs to look like? And this is a top characteristic, although it turns out that all eight really are critical for someone that's leading at the highest level. I promise I'm done. Well, at least until you give me more to think about, Deirdre.
Well, let's just keep moving through the character.
Okay.
And I have nothing to contend in what you just said. We're in alignment here, and that's a key word that it's the job of a leader to create alignment throughout the organization, so the organization is working toward the same results, and everything we're describing works toward creating that alignment in the organization. So characteristic two, get the job done and take responsibility. Big deal. I mean, how many times these days do people just defer responsibility? It never works. But anyway, so real leaders take responsibility and get their job done. But let's ask a basic question. What is the job at this higher level of execution and expectations that we're talking about? It is to build the strategy and organization around the optimal ability to deliver value to the marketplace. Let me repeat that. It's to build the strategy and organization around the optimal ability to deliver value to the marketplace. That actually should sound familiar to most leaders because that's frankly what they're supposed to be doing today. What we're saying is that with work fluency, with the new tools, with the new information, that the expectations drive this to a layer where you are thinking horizontally and using the AI insight layer to get you there. So that's the job today. And you and I, maybe 4 videos ago, showed our leadership and management model where we have the AI layer, AI insight layer, just crossing all of the responsibilities of leaders. And we'll come back to that. We'll probably do another of these on the AI insight layer, but generally, and this is what it looks like. It's that getting the job done means for a leader developing the strategy, operationalizing the strategy, measuring the strategy, adjusting the strategy as needed to keep the organization moving toward its goals. And the AI insight layer, which is not static, it is always being updated with new data and information and analysis and measurement and so forth, keeps you on the right track as you move through all of these layers of responsibility. So, as the layer is responsible for delivering the absolute top level results the organization can, the ability comes from the use of these AI models and the AI insight layer as supporting tools. Always remembering, and here's the responsibility part, that the leader always makes the final decision about finalizing output, owns the decisions coming out of the machine. I'll also comment that I think increasingly that leaders are going to be called out by, say, their own employees or by the business media or by customers if they're not using these models, if they're not working to take responsibility for optimizing the work of the organization through the use of models. Um, do you want to say something here, Tom, or should I keep moving through our characteristics?
Well, I think why don't you take and if you would, or I can do this if you'd like, is to say, how would this manifest itself in actually using the layer? Would you like me to spend a second on that?
Why don't you do that?
Okay.
Yes.
So so the question you might say is, okay, well, I have to get the job done and take full responsibility. And let's say you're the top leader in the business and you're trying to make sense of, okay, if I'm thinking about this today with these capabilities that I haven't had before, where do I start? I would say, ask the layer to tell you how it sees you are doing the job and taking full responsibility. What does it say? Right? And it may come back and say, the social media is saying that people don't like your support, or they don't think that you're taking a full responsibility for delivering, and but my terms, right? Delivering the best user experience in the world. Or they may have gotten that on one of the other ways of measuring consumer likes and dislikes for your business, or not necessarily consumers, but your customer, whoever that customer may be, maybe a B2B customer, or maybe a government customer, or maybe a not-for-profit customer. So the question becomes then, the first thing I would always say is, what is the world telling you about yourself? Does the world think you are getting the job done based on the promise they believe you have made to the marketplace, which is essentially what our longtime friend Bruce Turkel would say, is the point is a brand is a promise to the marketplace.
Hmm.
What are you promising to that marketplace? And by the way, I'm sure Bruce would say, well, Tom, that's only part of what a brand is. Yes, but
Yes.
one of the key elements is to, and by the way, if you don't follow Bruce, we recommend that you follow Bruce because Bruce Turkel down in Florida, he does an outstanding job in this area of branding and so forth. But uh, the idea is that you're making a promise to the marketplace, whether you deliver do so or not. It assumes in cases that there's a promise. And the question is, do they think you're meeting the promise? However they define it. And that's the question you want to understand. When you're looking at, do I get the job done? That is your job. It is meeting whatever promise. And if you need to change the promise, you need to change the promise, right? And then, does it think you're taking responsibility? So many companies, Deirdre, you and I, we're just consumers of their products or their services. We say we don't think they're taking the appropriate full responsibility. We think they are, but not what we would say.
Right.
That's the most important change you can make is start making sure you understand what the world is. I helped a friend of both of ours, a very successful entrepreneur, multi-time entrepreneur, helped he and the CEO that's running that business for him, be able to use the layer to expose exactly that, because they're a B2B customer. They do
Right.
B2B work and just say, look, you guys are coming to me talking about this problem. Do you really, really know what the marketplace is doing here and how they would view you changing what you're doing or trying to look at that channel? Do we really know? Let's go find out. And it didn't take a lot of work to go and find out what the world thought about that strategy. And it turned out that was not a good strategic move. There was a different, better strategic move, which, by the way, the entrepreneur shouldn't surprise you. That was what he wanted to do, yet he had a CEO that thought perhaps they could make progress the other way.
Yeah.
Now, the CEO's instincts are good. It's just a matter of timing. They need to get further on strategy A before they engage in strategy B. It's not that strategy B isn't good. It's just that the timing is not right. You need to be further along in the marketplace results, and it might create more friction in the marketplace. It also might create more distraction in his case of diluting his focus in running the business. Now, these are all things that's easy for me to see because I'm an outsider and he keeps me that way so that I can help them see these things. But but I would just say this is again, this is it. This is the job. Are you doing your job, the job that you're expected to do, and are you taking full responsibility? But it's not only in the eyes of your company or your board or your advisors or your investors, but it's also what the world thinks. And I would always start with the world because if the rest of the team isn't thinking like the world is thinking, then part of your job will be to influence their thinking because the world is where the value exchange ultimately occurs. I'm done.
Okay. So as you've been talking, Tom, I've been thinking so much more to say about this point, but let's move ahead.
So here's what I would recommend. We stop after an hour. We've got enough time to get through at least one or two more of these, and then we break, and then we do the next one and catch up with the other four. So
Okay.
that we're not, because I think going through and just talking through these subtleties of how do you do this? If we're going to take that apart, how do we do it? I think that's going to be as valuable as anything. Plus, Deirdre, you're articulating in a really clean way. What does this new world mean for, what does it mean for doing your job, getting it done, and then taking full responsibility? And then the idea of, oh, all right, how can I use this insight layer to inform me with, and by the way, notice how I made the point about there are there are multiple constituencies. I think it always starts on the outside, but then there is your oversight group, the board, then there is your company, and then there are your suppliers, right? And your partners back there, and you may have partners on the front end too. So it's about getting this horizontal view of the world of that value stream we talk about that is so valuable and something that people like you and I, who have spent time both on the academic side and on the practical side, more time, way more time on the practical than the academic, we're always thinking about these concepts, but being able to make them real is really hard. And now we're finding that yes, the data may be sketchy, but you have access to be able to get at them without spending millions of dollars for a consultant to go do it for you. By the way, there's still a role for those consultants to do
Oh,
work,
very
a
much so.
huge role, right? But
Very
my
much.
point is, you're not hampered by this any longer as long as you know these core things, which is the whole point behind what we at Deep Business do.
Mhm.
Now I'm done.
Okay.
I'm going to be a broken record on I'm done today, Deirdre. I just
Well, actually, I'm going to take your permission to go more slowly by bringing up one more aspect of this taking responsibility, because this continues into the third characteristic. And that is that leaders need to stay up to date fully on changes in the business world, including changes in technology, that they are responsible, leaders are responsible for learning about these generative AI models and how they can be used in business to deliver higher results, or else they're just missing something. They cannot lead their organization with people using these models if they themselves don't know how to use them, because they will not be able to assess the output from the models and the way that that affects business. I mean, you and I have talked about this in past videos about some of the chatbots that clearly no one in management has ever worked with one of these chatbots, because they take the, customer service chatbots that take people off, the deep end somewhere. And like that's a failure of responsibility. I think. But it's also that if you're creating this organization that is using these models, you need to know that if you have, say, the sales department working with the models in this way, what does that mean for the results of the sales department, assessing the results of the sales department, for using the sales data fed into the AI insight layer and everything else relating to sales. One problem in all of this is that too many people still think about technology as something done by the IT department, or about these AI models as, oh, just some software you download. It's sort of like, no, this is a new mindset about this technology and about the use of this technology in business. And you, as a leader, are responsible for building this new understanding of this technology into the way you go about building your business. Because you can't have just someone over in IT using these models or teaching people to use the models because you've lost control of your business because of the way these models are used in business today and will continue to be used in business in broader and broader ways going forward. So take responsibility for learning the technology so you yourself can use it, not just in the way we're talking about, but also in understanding what's going on in your marketplace and in your own business, for heaven's sakes. And now we get to characteristic 3, which is do your own work. Do your individual contribution here. Like you don't have the IT department run one of these models for you, or else the whole organization goes haywire.
And Deirdre,
But
may I interject a point just on that last one? Because
sure,
so I was working with someone again, of an incredibly capable person that has uh, been with us for a while, a younger person who's now very high level in a tech company and runs a product line. And his comments to me, and I mentioned this to you before, his comments to me were about cost. And they were about, I said, so tell me a little bit about what's going on with it, with your initiative. And one of the issues was cost. The question was, how much money are we going to invest in this? Because the use of AI models can be expensive. Now, he's switched on, he's using it both horizontally and vertically for his major strategic product, which is the strategic product of that company. And and he has said, that we're now setting limits on the per month cost, and I think that's a bad idea because we're slowing down the use of this. Now, there's ways you can do this, but here's my point. My point is he needs to get his CEO deeper into understanding this technology from this point of view. Now, I happen to know he did take in, I think he did give a book to the one of the head of the machine to the CEO. Um, but the point is you as doing your own work, right? And that gets into this do your own work, your individual contribution, bridging from taking full responsibility and getting the job done. Well, you could be creating a strategic disadvantage for yourself if you haven't figured out how to assess the cost of these, right?
mhm.
I don't know if it's right or wrong, right, to spend more money on this in that case, or to spend less, or to put a governor on it. I don't have full context. What I do know is that for someone in those levels of of responsibility, where you're the CEO of a tech company, a tech forward company, you have no choice but to understand this in the levels we're talking about, because you cannot make the right comment about, you can't make the right judgments about this. So that leads you into doing your own work, Deirdre. And I wanted to have you have that prelude so that you could talk about how does this change? Because I think this changes in again in a pretty significant way. So I'll leave the description of this to you.
Okay. Um, Doing your own work actually comes in two flavors. It's having other people in the organization do your work for you, or it's letting the machines do the work. And let's pick up that point because you and I think that, and we've heard so many stories about this, that people are simply currently using these AI models to do searches or to write notes for them or to combine papers or to maybe answer a question and then people are just taking the answer and turning it in as the final output of the machine. And as we've already said, this is not the way you don't let the machines do your work for you. It's a human machine partnership to come to the answers you need. But Tom, you and I have been showing, starting in video 62 up to the video series 72, how leaders can learn to use AI to do their own work. That's the work of strategy. And we recommend that people go back and look at some of these videos so they can see the results that the leaders are getting from simply working with the machines on strategic issues to come up with more answers. If you let the machine do the work, you're going to have a failed strategy and a failed execution because machines don't know. They're trained on big pools of data that may or may not relate to your organization. And they're working by averages. They're coming up with average results for you. That's not what you want for your organization. Um, Having others use the models to build strategies and carry out the work removes the leader from the work itself and from being able to deliver on the responsibilities, do the work of a leader. Run the organization, set goals for the organization. If you don't know what people are getting out of the work of these machines, you can't do this sort of work. You yourself have to be in there using this. Um, and do not ever, no leader, uh, blame other people in the organization if something goes wrong from the use of the machines. You need to take responsibility, use the machines, do your individual contribution, and stand up for it. Now, given the need to build the organization and the team to meet the changing substance of work, the leader must be directly involved in knowing what that work is. If you're going to be rewriting job descriptions, and actually this changing the organization will require some rewriting of job organizations. You need to know how to rewrite them. You need to know what to expect from your C-suite people in terms of doing their own work. You can only know what to expect if you yourself are in there doing your own work on the machine. You can't build an organization if you don't know what that organization will be doing. And that's where we are. And I think a lot of cases with this where leaders are saying, oh, yeah, my youngsters are using these machines. Well, what does that mean for your organization? And they don't know. Um, Given the need to build the organization and the team to meet the changing substance of work, you just have to that this is going to involve I'm trying to figure out how to work through a number of ideas here to come out with a coherent statement. Understanding what the machines do is actually going to lead you to the point where you're going to be changing your organizational structure because the reporting lines get different. There are going to be more dotted line relationships. If people are up out of their functional areas, there are going to be fewer layers of management within the functional areas and more management across the horizontal like this. Odds are most executives are going to have more people reporting up to them, either as a solid line or as a dotted line. And you, as a leader, as you build your organization, need to understand how this is going to happen anyway, so you can get ahead of it and start to set up the lines of reporting so you can fairly evaluate people throughout the organization, so you can fairly set goals for everyone in the organization, so you can understand the relationship among among the various functions better to deliver a higher quality of work throughout the organization. Um, Marketing and sales traditionally have been two different functions, and we all know instinctually that they've got to be working closer together. In the new organization, tapping into the AI insight layer, they're going to be actually reporting up to the same people. They've got to be so that they can coordinate their work to deliver higher level results for the organization. Human resources needs to be more closely related across the board. So they are creating the workforce and evaluating the workforce in ways that are useful to the organization in an ongoing way, however the organization evolves, and so forth. So this is you as a leader doing your work of not only building the strategy, but also building your team, building your organization, delivering the results, working with the board. You cannot do this work if you're not in there using these AI models yourself to accomplish a lot of what's going on and to understand what other people are doing. Let me stop on this point, Tom, and let you jump in here with this. I know you've got a lot to say.
So, um, the first thing I'm going to say is I think that we should stop at this point on this
Okay.
one and pick back up the on the fourth thing because we're going to sub-optimize, I think, and I don't think this is a good idea.
Yeah.
So, what one of the things that we will explore in another podcast is if you want to get an idea of this split about what is your work versus what is the work of the machine, for example, the point you were on a minute ago. Uh, Once you understand that, well, there are models for this. And again, I would say the first thing I would do if you're questioning this about yourself in this business is have a discussion with the LLM of choice and situate the business, and then say, okay, what are my competitors doing? How do their top leaders approach their jobs? What do they think of as their own individual contribution?
Hmm.
And what is that telling me about how does the world think about me?
Right.
You and I have our own views on the senior tech execs. We talk about it all the time.
Right.
And who does what and who sees their job as what. And the spectrum is enormous
Yeah.
about who is deeply involved in the organization and then who is hugely removed. And unfortunately, you and I have a bias that says we think the people that are deeply involved in their organization, if they know how to do it well, are the ones who are succeeding ultimately.
Correct.
And the
Absolutely.
rest are either following or they're really losing ground.
Right.
But there, and I think we should do this as a separate discussion, Deirdre. But you saw I did some work on Keoka Jackson,
Yeah.
and this is fascinating because he did a podcast with Lex Fridman back in 2019. And at the time, he was the head of Lockheed Martin's, basically their CTO, and I think that was his actual title then. He's gone on now, he's working for MITRE in an incredibly high level position. So he's still influential in this whole world, but a very articulate person, very bright, very capable. And he had a very strong understanding in his mind back in 2019 about what the responsibility of the human was and what the responsibility of the machine was. And he's thinking in terms of the leader, the top person doing whatever it is, whether you're doing deep space exploration for years or you're doing flights of a one of their aircraft on the Earth. And I actually did some work that went and said, okay, what does the world say today in 2026? Game hasn't changed. Got the same answer back. Yeah, those principles still hold. There,
Right.
by the way, it's different than, and one thing I think we should compare is the rules of robotics that was Asimov's. I believe that we may not uh, go completely by the rules of robotics, but before I make a judgment, I will go get back and reach back one of our Columbia colleagues and find out what his rules of robotics were. I know what the basic ones are, but I'm talking about the more evolved understanding of it.
Right.
But this goes back to this concept of doing your own work and your individual contribution. And notice you would hear, you can probably guess what I would say. You have to be deeply involved, just like Deirdre said, you have to be deeply involved in the understanding and the use of technology as it applies to your organization, both in terms of what you're doing, but also what the world is doing
Right.
with in your businesses, applying it forward and figuring out how does that factor. And we believe that this particular technology, unlike many, we believe that this technology, it's not about having a cursory understanding of it. It is not a book learning understanding of it. This is a use understanding of it, just like the internet that many of our listeners were not around for when that occurred. They're just products
Right.
of it.
Right.
Was the same way that if you were not deeply involved in it, you were not using it in the time that it came about, you just never caught up. You were one of those people that, yes, maybe you stayed and you followed until the game was up for you, but you weren't leading the effort. You cannot lead in this world. And this technology, I think you and I think that it is so significant in its capability and its ability to provide um, advantage
Right.
to companies of all sorts,
Hmm.
that that is your job, is part of your job is to figure out how to use it and apply it to your context.
Right.
Now, again, if you're struggling with what does that mean, don't don't waste your time. Ask the model to tell you what the world think it means for your context.
Right.
Because invariably, when you and I do this kind of work, Deirdre, about topics we don't know much about, we learn so much so fast that we begin to develop our own knowledge base. Because this gets back to there are, if you have an established baseline, Deirdre's baseline is much better than mine, but if you establish a baseline of being a constant learner and you've kept yourself in that mode like Deirdre and I have, we're constant learners. We're absorbing new information and fitting it in. We're staying on the far edge of thought leadership in certain areas of our lives, this being one. You can, it's so opening and so freeing what you can teach yourself today, right? I mean, I teach myself how to fly historic airplanes through
Correct.
the knowledge I can get out of sorting through historic manuals for airplanes that flew in the First and Second World War. Those
Right.
manuals are still available. Somebody PDF'd them. I can't read them, but my LLM can read them and translate them into my language today to be able to learn how to do this. The things you can learn on your own with nobody's help is enormous, but you have to be a learning machine. And so in order to fulfill this obligation, doing your own work and your own individual contribution to this world today, that's going to take you, um, you have the term, Deirdre, that you like to use, which is raising your game. If your
Correct.
game is not raised high enough, raise it, because you can do this and you don't need to go to, I hate to say this, you don't need to go to us at Columbia or whatever to do this. You can do this yourself. If you want to have us guide you along the way, we're glad to do that. That's what we do. But raise your game. If you have the sense that you're not there yet, raise your game. But I would just tell you, it's more your choice to raise the game because the knowledge is freely available to you by yourself with your laptop or your tablet or your desktop.
Right.
I'm done with my preaching. I promise. I'm done, Deirdre. I promise. And so I'll let you land the plane for us today.
All right, we've gotten through only three of the eight characteristics. Clearly, we're going to pick up this topic again. Remember what we're doing here. We're doing a really deep dive into our thinking underlying the points we're making in our videos about how leaders and boards of directors should be using this new technology to deliver higher results for the organization. So we consider it important to really take a moment, take a breath, as some of our listeners asked, and go deeply into some of these things to truly explain what we're talking about here. So with that, Tom, next week we pick up with number 4, and see you then.
It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Tom.